Welcome to ComSpark. We are live here in Cambridge, Massachusetts at MIT, attending the Chief Data Officer Quality Symposium, where the world's leaders in IT and data have gathered. My name is Matthew DeRamo. I am your guest host. Joining me today is Veda Bawo, Director of Data Governance with Raymond James. Veda, how are you?
I'm doing well. Your enunciation is immaculate.
Thank you very much. I've had a lot of practice. Appreciate you taking some time out of the symposium and sitting with us. I've got a handful of questions.
Okay.
So I'd say let's kind of jump right in.
Let's do it.
All right. So how do you measure success at your company? It's a three-part question, so I'll start with that one.
Very carefully.
Perfect.
Right. So look, so every company is a little different. So I've spent my tenure at traditional banks. So we use traditional banking measures, right? You have the external facing measures like customer satisfaction and all those great, right, JD Powers, et cetera, right, kinds of surveys. And of course, there are also measures around financial performance, right? So what's your profitability, right? What's your return on assets, equity, right, et cetera. Those are important as well as measures around liquidity, et cetera, right? And on top of that, you know, as competitive entities, we'll measure success based on things like market share, right? How many assets do we have under management compared to our peers, right? In the country, in the globe, right, et cetera. So those are the standard measures of success that we leverage to measure how good or not so good our companies are doing. But none of those are really specific to data now, are they?
No, so that's the follow-up. Specific metrics do you then track for success and how often?
Yeah, so, you know, the metrics as it relates to data, right? I'll spin this, right, to data. I like to look at things holistically, right? Okay. So I need to look at it from an input, process, output, and outcome perspective. Right? Because, you know, there's a process, there's a value chain that you go through as it relates to data. Sure. So I need to look at this holistically, right? Because day one, I'm not going to have an outcome metric that's meaningful, but I may have some really great process or input metrics, sure. Right? So if I think about this in terms of input metrics, I'm thinking about, okay, does my data organization understand the landscape? Do we understand the technology assets that that we're leveraging to manage or to maintain our data, right? And do we understand all of our data assets, right? The metadata, right? Inventory and those kinds of things. That's something you can measure, right? Because there's a universe and you know whether or not you have documented and captured and have a good handle on, right? Some portion or all of that universe. Pretty solid metric, right? When I think about process metrics, this is where, you know, you're actually, you know, going through the process. So do I have a good handle on change management, right? Is the data organization engaged and involved in changes that are happening in the organization that are directly dependent or relying upon data, right? Do I have a seat at the table? That's a good measure, right? Tons of change, have the impact assessments been done, and has the data organization been engaged, yes or no? Right? Exactly. Not whether or not the engagement is good or bad or timely, right? But did the engagement happen, right? Yeah. So looking at those kinds of processes, process-related items, and I would say also looking at data controls, right? So are my data controls actually in place at the right points of the process throughout the organization? I can measure that, right? Because in theory, I have a good handle on my processes and I have a good handle on where those controls should exist, and I should have a handle on whether or not those controls are being executed on a consistent basis, right? Like
you have that flow down pack.
Right. Yeah. So that's a process. You know, and then you can think about output and outcome related measures. Outcomes probably easiest to understand because those are related to like our business outcomes, right? So am I driving, you know, revenue up, right, around innovation, et cetera, or am I, you know, creating efficiencies and reducing costs? Am I mitigating risk, right? Am I helping to avoid errors, right, with the way that I'm managing and governing my data, right? So those are things, right, that you can intuitively think about in terms of outcome, output from a data organization. I would think in terms of, am I delivering governed and well-managed data assets to the organization, right? You can quantify that, right? Either you are or you're not. Right? Folks may go rogue and do things on their own, or they're coming to whatever you designate as the right authoritative or best place, right, to source that data, and you have the transparency and governance around that. So those are the kinds of measures, right, that can help to quantify and to help folks to understand kind of where things are working or not working, right, from a data governance or a data management perspective.
No, greatly appreciate you sharing that. So I got to ask a little bit about you. What got you hooked in this? How'd you get drawn to it?
Because I'm a little crazy. There's that.
Everybody?
Well, yeah, okay, we're a little wackadoodle.
Sure.
So beyond that, so I'm an accountant by education.
Okay.
When I came out of school, I decided I wanted to go and work for one of the big accounting firms. So did that. Was an auditor in financial services in New York for a bit. So I got to see kind of where the skeletons were buried, right?
Okay.
In lots of places. So I got to understand about risks and controls and those kinds of things. Anyway, left there because burnout, and then I went to go into banking, and I've been in banking for the duration of my tenure or my career. And in banking, I've done general ledger and financial control functions, right? I've done regulatory reporting. I've closed the books. I've done, and in those functions, guess what I get to see? Data, right? I get to leverage data. I don't know of any company that can close the books without having any manual adjustments. What is a manual adjustment? It's a correction of a data error, right? I don't know any organization that doesn't have, reconciliation variances. Right? Why do I have a reconciliation variance? Well, you could have an error, right, somewhere, but it's a data issue, right? Sure. So going through enough cycles of having to correct those errors or explain those variances, et cetera, really led me down the path of saying, stop, let me figure out why. Why is this data not correct, and who's responsible for getting it right? Right, and often the folks who are responsible were not the folks in my team, right, who were spending the time correcting the data, right, so that we could get across the finish line. It's usually the folks upstream. So that then started the dialogue around, okay, what projects do we need to have to fix the process, to fix the tools, right, et cetera, right? And then, you have conversations with folks in front office who are saying, I can't choose the right legal entity for that transaction because, on this input screen, I just see like 5 characters, and I don't know what that is. Okay, well, that's a technical issue as well as a process issue, right? You want to do the right thing, but you physically can't, right? So that kind of led me to, my love of data. I've spent time in, I'll say, mature data organizations, doing legal documentation like data management, as well as reference data, finance reference data management. So that is a part of my journey as well. But since I left, right, those kinds of roles, I've been doing data governance, data management, now that it's a thing with the CDOs, et cetera.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, I'm curious, so with respect to, and I think I might know the answer to this question, but probably not. With the variances that you see, right, in a lot of the data, are you still running from Excel worksheets, or do you feel as though you can provide real data accurately?
Look, I don't know. Okay, there's no organization that I've worked in that has eliminated Excel.
Okay.
So Excel is real, right? It's expedient, it's convenient. Exactly. I don't know if it's going away, but I think we're starting to get better, right? So automation of reconciliations is a thing, right? We often have tools that allow us to not only, automatically produce the reconciliation, but also to do the analysis, right, and to annotate, right, the reconciliation, make the comments, and have the back and forth workflow, et cetera, right? So those are real. But Excel is still a thing, right? We still use it for computation. We still use it to share information back and forth, right? It's just a part of our reality. Right? Will we ever get away from Excel? I don't know. Maybe one day. Maybe maybe in 30 years, right, when there's another generation that's in the door who hasn't grown up on Excel or the predecessors to Excel. Maybe we'll get there. But yeah, Excel is.
So it sounds like we're going to view it in a different light. It's more of just a tool or a resource like paper or Word is, but less around a reliability when it comes to capturing the data, transaction data.
Less and less, but again, look. There's no entity or organization that has a technology that is as flexible, right, and as easy to use as Excel, right? There just isn't, right? And so therefore, it is still a viable tool that's leveraged right across many organizations. Now the real challenge becomes, all right, so how are we securing and monitoring and governing all these things that are sitting in Excel? Big problem. Yeah, very. That's your new role. Very big. Look, it's a governance question, right? How do I govern, right, these user-maintained tools like Excel, right? Because look, I can spend all day and all night governing, what's sitting in a physical data store, But if I have folks, right, operating Excel, and Excel is the input for my final report that goes out the door, that's a risk, right? It's an unmitigated risk, right? So it's a real thing that lots of folks are grappling with.
Well, Veda, I couldn't appreciate the time more. Thank you so much for stepping out of the symposium and answering our questions.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. So for more information on today's interview, please visit comspark.tech.